There's a new report out in the New York Times about how top members of the Trump administration explicitly knew that their policy on the border would separate families. And, of course, they lied about it and didn't actually care that it did so. So this is something that we had assumed for a while, right? We kind of already knew that this was going on, that there was the reason behind it. But now this is essentially confirmation. And it actually comes from top attorneys over at the DOJ. They told top Justice Department officials that they were, quote, deeply concerned. This is 5 different attorneys at the Department of Justice that were very concerned about this, about the welfare of children that were separated from their parents as a result of Trump's zero-tolerance policy. Now, this was, of course, before coronavirus. We had found out that these children were not, given beds or toothbrushes or anything like that when they were just given a foil blanket. And that was it. Separated from their parents. There's rampant sexual abuse going on in these camps. And again, that's before COVID. Now that we have COVID, it has spread through these immigrant jails like wildfire, endangering so many people's lives. And so that's all a result of Donald Trump's separation at the border. And so what we learned from this is that they knew about this. The major players, they knew about this, and they didn't actually give a damn. In fact, the answer to the concerns made these 5 attorneys recoil in horror. And by the way, this is back when Jeff Sessions was the Attorney General. He said this, and this is all recorded in shorthand notes. Basically, Jeff Sessions had said in a meeting, we need to take away children. If you care about kids, don't bring them in. We will not give amnesty to people with kids. I mean, that's pretty clear, all right? Now, remember, a lot of these people coming into the country were refugees, which according to international law means that they deserve to get a hearing at least inside to be able to make their case to get asylum in this country. Instead, what we had is a policy that was breaking international law and separated these families on purpose. And by the way, some of these families have still not been reunited. But it gets worse. Now, Rod Rosenstein, also member of the Trump administration, the deputy attorney general at the time, went even further in a second call about a week later, telling these 5 prosecutors that it didn't matter how young the children were, they were still going to be separated and they were still going to be tried individually. I mean, again, remember the stories of toddlers, young children, infants being put into a courtroom without a representation. And being, I guess asking them to make their case. But they're an infant. They can't make a case about anything. They can't even talk. That's what they would do in the Trump administration. He said, though, Rosenstein did, that government lawyers should have not refused to prosecute 2 cases simply because the children were barely more than infants. So you actually had people in the government that looked at this and said, well, you're crazy. What are you doing? You're going to go and do this situation where you're going to bring these children into this courtroom. No, we're not going to have it. We're not going to try these children. That's ridiculous. And Rosenstein said, nope. No, we are going to bring the babies into court. And we're going to try them, and we're going to get rid of them. It's sick. Absolutely sick. And it's on purpose, by the way. See, the Justice Department's top officials, they find from an investigation by Michael Horowitz, the department's inspector general, those officials were a driving force behind the policy before Mr. Trump abandoned it among global outrage, according to this report and investigation. So the separation of migrant children, he finds, was at the heart of Donald Trump's of the Trump administration's assault on immigrants. So that's it. Though Mr. Sessions, by the way, sought to distance himself from the policy, i.e. lying, I had no idea that we were separating families on purpose. No, that wasn't the That really wasn't the whole point of this. They knew. They knew. He and other top law enforcement officials understood that zero tolerance, according to the report, meant that the migrant families would be separated and wanted that to happen because they believed it would be a deterrent to future illegal immigration, which of course it was not. Immigration continued unabated. It didn't do anything other than harm these families, which again were fleeing violence in Central America. In addition, the department's single-minded focus, according to the report, on increasing prosecutions came at the expense of careful and effective implementation of policy, especially with regard to prosecution of family unit adults and resulting child separations. In addition, the draft report also documented some other things as well that had previously not been known. In fact, government prosecutors reacted with alarm at the separation of children from their parents during a secret 2017 pilot program along the Mexican border in Texas. We now have heard of us taking breastfeeding defendant moms away from their infants, one government prosecutor wrote to his superiors. I did not believe this until I looked at the duty log. Yeah, no, they're literally snatching babies from their moms. Literally. In order to separate them. On purpose. Amazing. That is just disgusting. More. Border Patrol officers also missed serious felony cases because they were stretched too thin by the zero tolerance policy, requiring them to detain and prosecute all of misdemeanor illegal entry cases. What happened to going after the bad ones? What happened to actually stopping crime? Looks like you let the real criminals go because you're too busy going after the family that is fleeing violence in Central America. You let the actual criminals, you let the drug dealers, you let the murderers go. In fact, it gets worse. One Texas prosecutor warned that a top Justice Department official in 2018 that, quote, sex offenders were released as a result of this policy. You're letting the sex offenders go. Because we got to, we got to get them immigrants who are not the real criminals. Sickening. Absolutely sickening. There's more. A day after the president retreated, because he got a lot of criticism for this, Mr. Sessions distances his department from the decision, telling CBN News that, quote, we never really intended to separate families and children. Well, that was a lie, an absolute lie, according to the report. It made clear that from the policy's earliest days in a 5-month test along the border in Texas, Justice Department officials understood and encouraged the separation of children as an expected part of the desire to prosecute all undocumented border crossers. It is a hope that this separation will act as a deterrent to parents bringing their children into the harsh circumstances that are present when trying to enter the United States illegally, a Border Patrol official wrote on October 28, 2017, to the U.S. Attorney in New Mexico, according to the draft report. And yet, after the pilot program in Texas ended, the report asserted Mr. Sessions, Mr. Hamilton, and Mr. Rosenstein pushed aggressively to expand the practice across the entire southwestern border with help from prosecutors. By April 2018, Mr. Sessions moved to enact the zero tolerance policy across the entire border with Mexico. Mr. Rosenstein told the Inspector General that Mr. Sessions, quote, understood what the consequences were. They knew. They knew. The AG's goal, he said, was to create a more effective deterrent so that everybody would believe they had a risk of being prosecuted. Well, there you go. Which some people, of course, didn't agree with. There were some people with consciences. Surprisingly enough, at first, Kirstjen Nielsen was against it. So she had apparently not raised her hand to enact this policy, but was bullied into it. She eventually did it, defended it, enforced it anyway. And so there you go. All right. Now, in Arizona, there was another official here, Elizabeth Strange, who was the acting U.S. attorney. She actually led what they called a minor rebellion, temporarily declining 6 cases, citing concern about the children. That prompted a rebuke from top Justice Department officials who demanded to know why they would be declining these cases. Because they're children. They're children. That's why. Overall, Mr. Horowitz concluded in the draft report that Sessions and other senior department officials were aware that full implementation of zero-tolerance policy would result in criminal referrals by DHS of adults who entered the country illegally with children, and that the prosecution of these family unit adults would result in children being separated from their families. So essentially, they knew, they lied. Sessions publicly lied when he said he didn't know that it would lead to separations, when he said it wasn't their goal. He was lying. He's a liar. Simple as that. They knew what was going to happen. They actively encouraged it. These are not good people. We should not be allowing these people to continue to get away with these crimes against basically humanity. These families are irreparably harmed. Why? Because Donald Trump is a racist and wanted to continue to implement racist policies against Latinos. That's it. That's it. And they, destroyed these lives, destroyed these families for the sake, and I'm talking about Sessions here, they helped destroy these families all for the sake of serving a racist criminal president. No. I think in this situation, we need to not look forward and not backwards. No, we do need to look backwards because this is a humanitarian crime. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.